Well, President Trump is on Capitol Hill to speak with Republican lawmakers about his plan to stimulate the economy during the coronavirus outbreak. Here's the president's arrival just moments ago, flanked by Republican senators. Last night, the president proposed a potential payroll tax cut, as well as some help for hourly wage earners. That's in reaction to a dramatic drop in the global stock market, in part caused by a sharp decrease in oil prices. Today, the market is trying to bounce back. You can see there the Dow up a bit, about 150 points, after a 2,000-point fall on Monday. Well, for the latest, economic concerns come as 5 Republican lawmakers are self-quarantining. The 5 members of Congress came into contact with a person who last tested positive for the virus at the conservative political conference known as CPAC last week. One of those lawmakers is Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. The Republican actually flew on Air Force One yesterday. Vice President Pence, who's leading the coronavirus response, said yesterday that neither he nor the president has been tested for the virus yet. Well, today, the 2 men met with health insurance CEOs, and in his comments, the president said that the White House is working hard with various industries.
We are working very closely with the cruise line industry, and very, very closely. They're taking very strong steps in terms of people going on and going off, but they're spending a lot of money, and they are working very hard, and we're going to be helping that industry. Likewise, with the airline industry, they're taking very, very strong steps for people coming into our country, even getting off the planes. So we are working very closely with them. We're helping them.
I want to bring in Nancy Cordes, Weijia Jiang. Nancy's a CBS News chief congressional correspondent. Weijia is CBS News White House correspondent. Weijia, I want to start with you. What exactly does the president plan to do to help deal with the economy in this period of crisis?
Well, yesterday he really just gave a pretty broad overview of the measures that he is going to be talking to lawmakers about. And as you mentioned, he just got to Capitol Hill a short time ago. So along with that payroll tax and trying to find some relief for hourly workers who might be worried about missing a paycheck, he said that he'd be working with the Small Business Administration to look for small business loans for those who are feeling an impact, as well as the airline, cruise, and hotel industries, because of course they are taking a hit as people decide to stay home and avoid travel. Now, he's going to have to explain more of the nitty-gritty once he gets into them. But again, these are just his ideas of a wish list, and there's no realistic timeline. Perhaps Nancy can talk about that a little bit more, about when these lawmakers will actually be able to pass something. So the president says at some point after his meeting with lawmakers, he will hold a press conference to go over what they talked about. That's not yet on his official schedule yet, though, Rena, so we just have to wait to see if he actually entertains some questions afterward, because, of course, many Americans are wondering about their finances right now.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what a lot of people are talking about. Weijia, you raised some great questions from Nancy. Nancy, I'm curious, is there buy-in on both sides? Who's buying into this payroll tax cut?
Well, the problem is that both sides don't quite know what it is exactly that they would be buying into. We got very little in the way of specifics from the White House. The president did say that he's interested in a payroll tax cut, but he didn't say how much of a cut and how long it would last. And so those are very important questions. Republicans in the past have been a little bit reluctant to go down that road. We'll see if they're more open to it this time, because it is a Republican president who's proposing it. But he also said he wants to do something for hourly workers who might get affected by this. He didn't say exactly what it is he wants to do for those workers. And so without those kinds of specifics, it's very difficult to get buy-in here on Capitol Hill. You have Democrats in the House in particular who want to go a lot further. They say they might be open to a payroll tax cut, but they don't believe that it does enough, particularly for low-income Americans. They want to go further. They want to do paid family sick leave. They want to perhaps expand unemployment insurance for people who find themselves out of work for a long time. And then one big question looming over all of this, Rena, is whether particular industries are going to need stimulus as well, and if so, what kind of stimulus and how much. And again, that's a very difficult question to start to answer here on Capitol Hill when you don't know how long this crisis is going to last and how deeply some of these industries are going to be affected. We know they're hurting right now. What we don't know is whether that pain is going to last weeks or months.
Yeah, you know, when we started initially covering coronavirus, I thought this was just going to be a couple of weeks and we'd be over it. And more you talk to folks in the industry, both the financial world and the health industry, they're preparing for significantly longer for this. Nancy, I want to ask you about your interview. You actually spoke with Democratic Congresswoman Donna Shalala from Florida. What a great person to speak to. For almost a decade, she was actually the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I want to play for you what she had to say.
My own view is a payroll tax holiday is absolutely inadequate for in terms of the things that we need to do. We need paid leave, sick leave. We need to upgrade insurance, particularly unemployment insurance. There are a number of things that we need to do. We need to fill in the gaps in the healthcare system. We shouldn't get away with thinking that just a holiday on a payroll tax will make a difference for workers in this country.
She's got experience in this, Nancy. Do lawmakers believe preparing some sort of a spending package that's even larger than the $8 billion is needed? Do two sides, do they agree at this point on how to move forward?
No, there's a variety of opinions about that. We've heard from several Republicans, for example, just today, who say, let's watch and see what happens. Let's figure out how big the problem is before we start trying to solve it. And then you've got Democrats like Shalala saying, sure, the payroll tax can be one piece of the puzzle, but it can't be the only piece of the puzzle. Because what we're talking about here, remember, is the 6% in your paycheck every week or every 2 weeks that gets taken out for Medicare and Social Security. So a payroll tax holiday would essentially give you back some or all of that 6% every week. And so if you're talking about a low-income worker, that's not a lot of extra money. It adds up over time, but it would be a slow process. And so Democrats argue there are more efficient ways to get that money out the door to people who might need it the most. And then, something else I've heard from Republicans and Democrats today, Rena, is, if Congress had put together a big infrastructure spending package and that money had already gone out the door, it's something people have been talking about for years, but they haven't been able to see eye to eye on where the money comes from, that actually Congress and the nation would be a little bit ahead of the game right now, because that money could be used to stimulate the economy in and of itself. But Congress has made almost no progress on that front. And so it's hard to see, given all this uncertainty right now, that Congress is going to get any kind of legislation squared away over the course of the next week. We might be looking at a multi-week process here. Wow,
incredible. I want to ask you, sort of heading out to the Middle East and broaden this out a little bit. Boy, watching those oil prices yesterday, so incredible. The president spoke with Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, yesterday. The White House says they discussed the global energy markets after the oil prices tanked. What do we know about this call? And is this him attempting to mitigate the global economic fallout at this point?
The White House was very vague about this call afterward, just saying that the two talked about the energy markets and also other critical issues. Of course, this is the critical issue right now. But I think what's more telling is that the president also tweeted that Saudi Arabia and Russia are arguing over the price and flow of oil. And that is the reason for the market drop. So clearly, I think what's happening is he acknowledges these dramatic movements and he's trying to separate what's happening from coronavirus. And, the president said from the beginning that the U.S. economy could withstand the effects of the coronavirus, no problem. Now he is planning this massive economic stimulus package, which shows the opposite. And so I think that, in an effort to try to maintain his narrative and keep control of his talking point that the economy is strong and that there are other reasons to blame, I think that's why we are seeing this. And certainly that call was very timely to do that.
Absolutely. And there was some concern over the weekend. He was the king of Saudi Arabia in bad health. We have no confirmation of that, but wondering, could there be a change over there at some point? We just don't know. know. There's such little information coming out. Nancy, I want to turn to you and ask you about yesterday. The Senate Finance Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley downplayed concerns as they relate to the economy, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, now's not the time to be fearful. I want to play for you his comments.
Right now, as Dr. Anthony Fauci of the National Institutes of Health reminds us, the risk that any individual American will contract the disease remains low. This is not a time for fear. It is a time to continue calmly scaling up the serious and smart preparations that have already been underway, so the United States can continue working to blunt, slow, and mitigate the spread within our borders.
Nancy, what's the sense on Capitol Hill? Are Republican lawmakers buying into just how severe and serious this coronavirus is?
I think we have widespread acknowledgement at this point here on Capitol Hill that this is a very serious issue, especially when you've got lawmakers who have colleagues who are self-quarantining, and they are really taking things on a day-by-day basis, we're told, in conjunction with the attending physician here on Capitol Hill, when it comes to whether tours should continue here on Capitol Hill, whether aides should continue to come to work. At this point, most lawmakers I've spoken to say they do believe that they should continue to stay at work, that there's no reason to be overly alarmed, although one lawmaker, Jerry Nadler, said this morning he does think that tours should be canceled for now. So there's a diversity of opinion, but the most important thing that we see here on Capitol Hill right now is the preparation for the possibility that this will become more widespread and that aides would have to work from home. Do they have working laptops so they can continue to do the nation's business even if they can't come to this particular building? Speaker Pelosi has made it very clear that she believes that Congress needs to send a message to the American people that lawmakers are hard at work on behalf of their constituents. And so she has argued very strenuously that it is going to be business as usual here on Capitol Hill until security and health concerns dictate that they change course.
Weijia, I want to talk to you for a little bit about the corona tests as well. The president and the vice president met with health insurance executives today to discuss the tests. Have we gotten any more clarification from the White House, the number of tests that might be available, and how much is this going to cost folks?
So just a short time ago, Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar actually spoke about this on Capitol Hill, reaffirming the numbers that we have heard in the past couple days, even though there were all kinds of numbers out there last week. And he said that on Friday, 1.1 million tests were shipped out. As of right now, another million are ready to be shipped. And are ready in case people order them. And by the end of the week, an additional 4 million tests will have been produced. But so far, Rena, they're unable to give us a number of how many Americans have actually been tested for this. And that's what's really critical. That's the number that matters, because if you talk to medical experts, they say that's really how you get this map, how you can draw out exactly how the virus is spreading and in what parts and why. And, Azar has said that it's impossible to do that for now because they don't have a system in place to communicate with these private labs who don't have to report, who they are testing and how many. And also because if a person is tested, a lot of times it'll be more than one test that they're getting. But it just seems wild that at this point, when we're facing such a crisis, that the administration does not have these hard numbers and does not have a way of tracking who is being tested. As far as how much it's going to cost, the vice president and president met today with about 10 insurance companies who have all pledged that they will waive copays for people who need a coronavirus test and extend coverage for people who need treatment. Now, this is just 10 companies, a lot of big names in there, including Anthem, Kaiser, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and United. Of course, that's not everybody, so people will have to check with their providers, but the administration insists that they are working with everybody they can to make sure people who want the test can ultimately get it and not have to pay. But I think your question was, how much does it actually cost? And we don't know that yet.
Well, glad to hear that there are some efforts to help get folks tested out there. Clearly not enough, but glad they're moving on this. Nancy Cortez, Weijia Jiang, thank you both very, very much.